To be another major international summit for the president. Brand new video in moments ago. National Security Advisor John Bolton meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Bolton is there for a series of high-level meetings, laying the groundwork for a potential face-to-face sit-down between Putin and Trump and what could be a key summit between the U.S. and Russia. So more on this as it comes into us inside of America's Newsroom. First, though, awaiting the arrival and highly anticipated interview of anti-Trump FBI agent Peter Strzok. He's heading to the Hill right now, in fact, to face House lawmakers. Good morning. Back together. I'm Bill Hever. How you doing?
There he is, back live and in person.
The Robin Egg Blue looks very good.
Thank you very much. Good to have you back, Bill. I'm Sandra Smith. Lawmakers from 2 House committees will finally get to hear from the man behind thousands and thousands of those anti-Trump text messages when he speaks to them behind closed doors about 1 hour from now. Strzok was one of the top agents on the Clinton investigation and the Mueller probe before he was removed by the special counsel.
Meanwhile, you have Senator Lindsey Graham saying he still wants to know if Strzok's political bias prompted the investigation of the Trump campaign's contacts with Russia in the first place.
How would you like this guy supervising a confidential informant against the Trump campaign, given his bias and given his dislike for President Trump? He should be the last guy to go to court to get a warrant on anybody associated with the Trump campaign. My question is, what role did they play in the Russian investigation?
Well, Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge outside the hearing room, live on the Hill. Catherine, we begin with you. Good morning.
Well, thank you, Bill, and good morning. FBI agent Peter Strzok is uniquely situated because he had direct oversight of the Clinton email as well as the Russia investigations. It's also important to note that Agent Strzok drafted the memo that kick-started the Russia probe, known as an electronic communication, or EC. And then, of course, you go to the text messages that were uncovered by the Inspector General from August of 2016 between Agent Strzok and FBI lawyer Lisa Page, where he talks about stopping candidate Trump. And this was important to the Inspector General because he felt it went beyond political bias and spoke to taking overt action to stop the presidential candidate. Here's Congressman Matt Gaetz.
The question goes beyond just personal bias. The question is whether or not the bias of Peter Strzok manifested itself in the form of investigative decisions. Remember, Strzok was the lead investigator on the Hillary Clinton email investigation. He was on the FBI's investigation into President Trump and Russia, and then he was drafted onto the Mueller probe. So that's going 3 for 3. And we ought to know whether or not there was bias in terms of the prioritization of the Trump-Russia investigation over the Hillary Clinton email investigation.
Today's session is behind closed doors, but the interview with Agent Strzok will be transcribed. And committee sources have told Fox News that they fully anticipate that Agent Strzok will testify publicly in the very near future. For his part, Agent Strzok's lawyer has said that he welcomes the opportunity to speak to Congress. He is coming here voluntarily today. A subpoena was not required in the end. And he believes that the Inspector General's report vindicates him in the sense that it did not find hard evidence that political bias infected his decision-making.
So, okay, that's all today. Tomorrow could be a big day also. What's happening then?
I think tomorrow, in many respects, is an even larger day because we're going to have public testimony before the House Oversight and House Judiciary Committees from the FBI Director Christopher Wray as well as the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. This investigation by the House committees goes back well over a year, and they're looking at the decision-making by the FBI and Justice Department in 2016. So we can expect major headlines not only on the Clinton email case, but also the Russia investigation, because at the end of the day, it was the same cast of players at the FBI and Justice Department that transitioned between these cases, Bill.
Catherine, thank you. Catherine Herridge there on the Hill. We'll be back with you later this hour. Congressman Bob Goodlatte, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, he is here live. He's one of the those meeting with Strzok today. So Congressman Goodlatte is here in about 40 minutes from now, 9:40 a.m. Eastern Time.
Ahead of that closed-door meeting, a highly anticipated one at that. We'll wait on that. Meanwhile, former U.S. Attorney Andrew McCarthy telling Sean Hannity he thinks Strzok will have plenty to say when he meets with House lawmakers.
He probably is going to talk, Sean, because he talked to Horowitz. So, you know, I think he sounds like he's one of these guys who thinks he can go into the room and kind of control room. Horowitz said that he had very long, involved answers on every question he asked about, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? So he may just be one of these guys who thinks he can go into that environment and do okay.
You can hear more from today's headliner, Andrew McCarthy, coming up in the next hour, our headliner today.
Looking forward to all that. He's got a lot to say about this, and we'll see what we get from Peter Strzok and others coming up, right? In the meantime, did you see what happened last night? Wow. These primaries have been fascinating. A major upset in New York's Democratic primary by a young socialist, aged 28, as Trump-backed candidates. Well, they scored big victories in Republican races. First, though, 28-year-old political newcomer Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez defeating 10-term congressman and chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, Joe Crowley, by more than 3,600 votes. President Trump tweeting about it last night. Here it is, quote, "Wow, big Trump hater Congressman Joe Crowley, who many expected was going to take Nancy Pelosi's place, just lost his primary election." In other words, he's out. That is a big one that nobody saw happening. Perhaps he should have been nicer and more respectful to his president. Let's analyze it. Byron York, chief political correspondent, Washington Examiner, to Fox News contributor. Byron, good day to you. So
good morning,
start with what happened in New York. Start with the left. Maybe reflect on what happened in Maryland as well. Many thought the progressive left was on the move, but it really did not emerge until last night, Byron.
Absolutely, this is a big deal, and we're actually hearing it compared a little bit to Representative Eric Cantor's defeat in Virginia in 2014, which really signaled that there was a lot of disruption going on inside the Republican Party, which we saw big time in 2016. So now you have the old guard, 10-term, in line to be leadership, Joe Crowley, being upset by a 28-year-old socialist candidate. You really see the energy in the Bernie wing of the Democratic Party, because I think if we weren't focused on what Donald Trump is doing and saying every single day, the divisions inside the Democratic Party would be a much bigger story. That old Hillary-Bernie fight is still going on.
All right, so Medicare for all, that's what she supports, is proud of it. Housing as a human right, federal jobs guarantee. This is a very leftward-leaning candidate on policy, Byron.
A big win for the very progressive wing of the party. And by the way, Joe Crowley had really moved a lot of his positions to the left to try to accommodate his district, a very, very left-leaning, deeply, deeply blue district. There's also something generational going on here. The current leadership of the House Democratic Party, Pelosi, Hoyer, and Clyburn are, I believe, 78, 79, and 77 years old, respectively. Joe Crowley at 56 would have been the new generation of leadership, and now he has been defeated by a 28-year-old. Really, again, indicates there's a lot of turmoil going on in the party.
You're exactly about that. So keep an eye on that story. For the Republicans, the president was a big winner. You had McMaster winning the governor's race in South Carolina. You had Dan Donovan winning in Staten Island here in New York. That's significant.
It absolutely is. And I think what it shows is the enormous level of approval of the president inside the Republican Party. We've seen some polls lately showing that Republican approval for the president's job performance is around 90%, higher than previous Republicans at this time in their terms. And so if you look at South Carolina, where you have the governor, Henry McMaster, very early supporter of Donald Trump in South Carolina, and then contrast that to Representative Mark Sanford, who just lost his Republican primary to a more pro-Trump candidate. I think you see the power of the president in Republican politics.
I got one more for you, 30 seconds. Mitt Romney is almost a shoo-in to be a U.S. senator. Wow.
Oh,
how's that going to go?
Well, that's definitely going to happen. So, 30 years after he wanted to be in the Senate from Massachusetts, he is definitely going to be in the Senate from Utah. Now, what everybody is going to be watching is what kind of relationship he has with the president. He actually published an op-ed on it, Mitt Romney did the other day, saying that he'd agree and support the president when he supports the policies, and then he would call out the president when he doesn't. And I think what we're going to see is, if Romney comes to Washington as a senator and Trump does something outrageous, Romney will probably criticize him, but end up voting with the president maybe 90+% of the time.
Thank you, Byron.
Thank you, Bill.
Sure is interesting. Talk to you again real soon. Thanks.
Fox News alert, National Security Advisor John Bolton is in Moscow to lay the groundwork for a possible U.S.-Russia summit. He is expected to meet Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and then head to the Kremlin for a meeting with President Vladimir Putin. Kristen Fisher's live from the White House. Kristen, what are they expected to talk about?
Well, they're going to be talking about this possible Trump-Putin summit, but really, Sandra, the time to watch is 12:30 Eastern time, because that's when John Bolton is expected to give a press conference where he may announce the date and location of this possible Trump-Putin summit. Now, John Bolton, he is no friend to Russian President Vladimir Putin. In fact, just last year, he accused him of lying and said that the U.S. negotiates with Russia at its peril. But now he's the administration's point man for negotiating the terms of this possible summit. Now, the last time that Presidents Trump and Putin met in person was on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Vietnam last November. Now it's looking like, if this summit does take place, that it would happen sometime in mid-July, right after the NATO summit. And that's led to some concern among our NATO allies. They worry about a possible repeat of the G7 summit in Canada, where President Trump had that contentious meeting with traditional U.S. allies and then turned around and lavished praise on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Singapore. So our NATO allies worry that essentially the same thing could happen here. And of course, President Putin is diametrically opposed to the very existence of NATO. Sandra?
Kristen, on Capitol Hill, where House leaders are expected to vote on the compromised immigration bill, what is, at this point, the likelihood of it passing?
Well, it's not looking very good, Sandra. And, you know, House Republicans have really been scrambling over the last 24 hours or so to try to add some last-minute changes to try to attract more support for this so-called compromise immigration bill. But they're having a really tough time getting conservatives on board, especially since the president himself has sent some mixed messages about it. But just minutes ago, President Trump tweeted his support for it, saying that, quote, House Republicans should pass the strong but fair immigration bill known as the Goodlatte 2 in their afternoon vote today. He went on to say that even though the Dems won't let it pass in the Senate, passage will show that we want strong borders and security, while the Dems want open borders, equal crime, win. So, Sandra, we'll see if that's enough to sway some of those wary conservatives on Capitol Hill.
Good luck. A lot there. Kristen Fisher, thank you.
13 past now, awaiting a major decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, how it may affect workplaces nationwide. When justices take up the case regarding unions, we are live from the court in moments to let you know what is on the line. A lot on the line today, Sandra.
Plus, President Trump says the travel ban victory is a vindication of his tough policies. Republican Senator John Kennedy will be here. He is our guest with reaction.
And Republicans calling for a vote on the House floor to censure Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters for her calls targeting Trump administration members. In a moment, meet the lawmaker who says she crossed the line and is calling for action now.
But the reality is, I don't have anything personally against Ms. Waters. I just think that her discourse was actually a discredit to the House of Representatives, and that's the measure of whether somebody should be censured. I think she should be responsible for what she said.
There's no place for any kind of call of violence or harassment of anybody based on your political viewpoints of all things. This is America. We didn't do that when Barack Obama was president. There were a lot of things we didn't agree with him on in terms of his policies, but we never tried to incite violence against him or his supporters. There's no place for that on either side of the political aisle.
So that's the House Majority Whip, Steve Scalise. He would know all about this, considering his history being shot more than a year ago. Responding to a motion to censure Congresswoman Maxine Waters after she called on supporters publicly confront Trump administration officials. Moments ago, the president tweeted this: "Congratulations to Maxine Waters, whose crazy rants have made her, together with Nancy Pelosi, the unhinged face of the Democratic Party. Together they will make America weak again, but have no fear. America is now stronger than ever before, and I'm not going anywhere." End tweet. My next guest introduced the measure to have Waters censured. He's with me now, and Congressman Andy Biggs. Welcome back to America's Newsroom. What do you hope to get out of this?
Well, Bill, I think that the institution has to take a stance. That's what the framers in the Constitution said. You know, you have to police yourself. And I think just making individual comments, like many of us have said, this is repugnant, just doesn't do it, because she has indicated since she made her initial comments that she doesn't see anything wrong with them, that she doesn't have any remorse, no regrets, and she's going to continue to encourage this kind of in-your-face harassment of people who support President Trump and work on his staff. I mean, I see visions of the Elaine Chao incident. Now for Pete's sakes, we have a press secretary that has to have a security detail. You can't keep lighting the fuse here and hope that nothing happens, because
well,
I
if
think we're
something
just on a
does happen,
tinderbox.
everybody on the right and left are going to look back at it with regret. You mentioned the Elaine Chao incident. Here it is from Georgetown University. Go ahead and roll it, guys. She was leaving an event there with her husband, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and this is what happened there. Well, she let them have it, and apparently one of the guys in that group is his parents are from Mexico, and if you check his Twitter feed, he wants no Border Patrol, no ICE, which is something we were talking about a bit earlier today, though. The left would say that the president is partly to blame for this, because they would argue that he started this trend. I don't know where you are on that. I'll let you answer that in a moment. But Brit Hume writes this at FoxNews.com here. We need to draw back from this place, he says. One way would be to recognize the wisdom in what's probably the greatest self-help book ever written, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The book, written in 1939, is intended as a guide for problem drinkers, but its famous 12 steps trace a path for anyone. In America today, the book's elaboration on Step 10 practically cries out to be followed. Nothing pays off restraint of pen and tongue, end quote, suggesting there that everybody needs to pull back.
Well, Bill, I agree with that, and that's effectively what I'm trying to do with this censure motion, is just say, look, what happened here was unacceptable. Everybody, when I talk to people on the other side of the aisle who are friends of mine, they agree this is unacceptable rhetoric, it's unacceptable conduct. The only one who doesn't get it is Representative Waters, and so I think we need to have an institutional stop check, but it causes all of us to step back and reevaluate. You just remember about a year ago, when after Steve Scalise was shot, we all got together on the floor and said, we're going to dial down our rhetoric. We're going to talk about policies and issues. We're going to leave personalities out of this. But we're not doing that. We're not seeing that. What we're seeing is instead this kind of attempt to ratchet this up, to get physical confrontations going 24/7. In fact, in the most mundane aspects of life. I mean, eating
it's
out.
Dangerous. It's dangerous. Yeah. And your voice is well heard, sir. Thank you for coming on today, and we'll see what kind of progress you make. Thank you, sir. Andy Biggs with us out of Arizona today on the Hill. Thanks.
Well, speaking of civility, we're learning a lot more about that restaurant owner who kicked Sarah Sanders out of the restaurant this weekend and set off a firestorm. Plus, a federal judge has ordered the U.S. Border Patrol to stop separating families. This as President Trump slams America's immigration laws.
We have the worst immigration laws in the history of the world, and it's a joke. People can't believe it. Other countries look at us and they say, how is that possible? Somebody touches our land, we now take them to a court, to a judge.
White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders now expected to receive a Secret Service detail. That move coming after she and her family were asked to leave a restaurant in Lexington, Virginia, because the staff objected to her role in the Trump administration. Sanders' father, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, speaking out about that and had this to say.
I do think her attitude was, I could stay and make a scene. Sure, I could demand that she serve me. But to what end? How does that serve a growing level of civility? The truth is it doesn't. So when the manager made it clear that she wanted her to exit the restaurant, she did it quietly and she did it politely. That's the way Southern women do things. They don't disrespect others.
So now we know the owner of the Red Hen restaurant who kicked Sanders out has now stepped down from her leadership position with a local business group in Virginia.
Well, a federal judge now ordering the U.S. Border Patrol to stop separating families at the southern border and to reunite families already separated within 30 days. This as President Trump urges Congress for more funding for his border wall. Yesterday, he spoke with GOP lawmakers slamming America's immigration laws.
It is a hodgepodge of laws that have been put together over years, and we have to change it. It's really bad when it's a criminal, and we have plenty of them coming into the country this way. And they use the children. They use these young children for their own benefit. So we have to change the whole immigration picture.
Brian Yanis joins us now live from Mission, Texas. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Sandra. Well, the federal district judge, Dana Sabro, issued a late-night injunction in San Diego, which says that all 2,300 separated families must be reunited nationwide within 30 days. That is, by July 26th. It also said that the children 5 and younger must be reunited within 14 days. All parents must also have had at least a telephone conversation with their child within 10 days, and the child can no longer be separated unless the parent is deemed unfit. Now, in this ruling, Judge Sabro said that the government hastily separated families with no effective tracking system in place, stating, quote, "The unfortunate reality is that under the present system, migrant children are not accounted for with the same efficiency and accuracy as property. Certainly, that cannot satisfy the requirements of due process." And meanwhile, protests continued yesterday nationwide, also in El Paso, as the Trump administration's Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar testified that parents are now going to have to prove that they are in fact the legal guardians of these separated children, and that HHS cannot reunite families while parents are still in custody.
I cannot reunite them, though, while the parents are in custody because of the court order that doesn't allow the kids to be with their parents for more than 20 days. I find it hard to imagine, but we need Congress to fix that.
The average stay for a child in HHS care, unaccompanied minor, it was 57 days. So again, Sandra, looks like this is not going to be a days-long process, but perhaps weeks, months, who knows, Sandra.
Brian, is there any evidence the separation policy deterred people from crossing?
We're getting new numbers now from the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol that points to that. Look at these numbers. This is from last week when the height of the separation policy and the media coverage was at its highest. And you can see that in a typical week in the Rio Grande Valley, which is where we're at, 4,200 plus migrants were apprehended in this area. Last week, that number was 3,100, so about a 25% decline given everything that's been happening. So again, anecdotal evidence, and again, we'll have to see the numbers over time. But right here in the Rio Grande Valley, which saw the highest number of migrants last year be apprehended, we're seeing a 25% decline last week. Sandra.
Brian Yanis in Mission, Texas for us. Thank you.
Got another news alert here now. New concerns over North Korea's nuclear ambitions, what new satellite images are showing, and how the Trump team, a few weeks removed from that Singapore summit, is now responding on all that, Sandra.
And we are looking live now. At any moment, we could get a glimpse of that anti-Trump agent working for the FBI. Everyone's waiting to hear what he has to say when he goes behind closed doors with House lawmakers this morning.
Also, new reaction in D.C. after the president's victory on the travel ban. Louisiana Senator John Kennedy reacts on that and more coming up next live.
We had a tremendous victory today, and we greatly appreciate it. We needed it as a country. That was a big victory for, and I can tell you everyone at this table is very happy about it, but that was a big victory for our country.
Fox News alert, President Trump praising the Supreme Court's decision to uphold the latest version of his administration's controversial travel ban, which allows travel restrictions to remain
for our Constitution. We have to be tough, and we have to be safe, and we have to be secure.
This is not a religious ban. The first order was poorly written. The third iteration of the executive order made a lot of sense to me. You're picking out countries with high threat levels, with a poor vetting process, so it makes sense, and I think this ruling makes it safer.
If it really was about our safety, It would be a different list, two different tailored lists. But again, this stems from a person that started their campaign talking about Mexicans and Muslims in a way that just disappoints them.
Let's bring in Louisiana Republican Senator John Kennedy. He serves on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Kennedy, thank you for your time this morning.
You bet.
Well, you've been roaming the halls there. What is the reaction you're hearing from your colleagues as this sits in this morning?
Well, mixed, depending on your politics. But if you set aside your politics, and if you know the difference between a law book and an LL Bean catalog, and you read the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, the ruling was clearly correct. In that act, Congress has given the president, whomever the president may be, broad power to protect this country and use the immigration laws to do it. And all the president said in his executive order, he said, here are 7 countries, they're state sponsors of terrorism, and we can't check people out. We can't do a background check on the people who live in those countries who want to come to America. How are you going to do a background check on somebody from Syria? You going to call the Syrian Chamber of Commerce? I mean, the country's at war. And the president said, because of this danger, we're not going to let these folks in. And it's a matter of national security. The dissent tried to make it a religious test. Basically what the dissent says, as I read it, if Muslims, if you're a practitioner of the Muslim religion, you deserve special treatment. I don't agree with that. This executive order treats all religions equally. Venezuela was on the list. Venezuela is 88% Roman Catholic. 10% of the people in Syria are Christians. Now, the dissent seemed to say, and some of the left wing, the Maxine Waters wing of Washington, which is a lot of people, they say, well, if the list includes any Muslims, Muslims can't be forbidden because they deserve special treatment. And I don't read the Constitution that way. Does this ruling, as your colleague in the Senate, Lindsey Graham, said, make this country safer? Oh, yeah, there's no question. I mean, if you live in Syria right now and you want to come to America, how do we check you out? If you live in Venezuela, if you live in Yemen, right, and they say, we're a good person, we want to come to America. Well, we need to do a background check. How do you do that?
So, Senator, I'm going to jump in here because we've got images of Peter Strzok, the anti-Trump FBI agent. He is now arriving on Capitol Hill, and I say anti-Trump agent because, of course, all of those thousands of text messages have now been revealed about his anti-Trump sentiment while working at the FBI. But that was Peter Strzok. He has arrived. He will be sitting down behind closed doors with members of Congress shortly to answer some questions there. He has agreed to do so voluntarily. Before I move on the idea of immigration, Senator, do you have anything to add there as we just saw Peter Strzok arrive there?
No, I think the decision by the U.S. Supreme Court was correct. It upheld the rule of law. It upheld the importance of national security. I regret that the dissent just talked about President Trump. The majority opinion, as it should, talked about the presidency.
All right. Meanwhile, Bill, this morning, or today, I should say, what are you hearing about the likelihood of that passing, Senator?
Oh, all across the spectrum. I don't think Democrats will vote for anything if they perceive it as a victory for President Trump. I regret that, but I think that's just the reality. Frankly, I'm not going to support any immigration legislation until we first secure the border. Period. End of discussion.
All right. Senator Kennedy, always good to have you on the program. Hope you come back. Busy morning there. Thank you, sir.
So that would mean the immigration vote will go down twice if indeed it does not pass today.
Yeah, we'll see where that goes. And Peter Strzok has now arrived on Capitol Hill.
You're right about that.
First time we've really seen him recently.
Yeah, and from what we hear, he likes to talk and he likes to answer questions. And so this interview, let's say, could go for a very long time today on the Hill, and we'll see what comes of it. But in a moment here, Sandra, Bob Goodlatte is one of those. There's Catherine Harris. Did she get a question in? Did she get a question?
He did not answer any questions. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, Bob Goodlatte's chairman of that committee, and he is on standby. We'll talk to him right after this break. Come on back, folks. What will he ask? You're about to find out. His first question, perhaps. Next. The anti-Trump FBI agent Peter Strzok and House lawmakers moments ago, there he is appearing on the Hill. He agreed to appear for a closed-door interview, just arriving, and my next guest issued a subpoena to compel that appearance. That subpoena is not necessary now. Bob Goodlatte, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, with me now. You're going to be key in this questioning of Peter Strzok, and good morning to you, and thank you for your time, sir.
Thanks, Bill.
Do you want to tip your hand? What's your question?
No, we have lots of questions, and I think your viewers have been following this and know the construct here. Peter Strzok is at the center of a great deal of controversy with regard to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, both with regard to the investigation into former Secretary of State and presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, and into the so-called Trump-Russia investigation, and his bias reflected in the texts that he exchanged with Lisa Page, another FBI employee, are just absolutely stunning. So you can imagine we'll be asking a lot of questions about that bias and about his role in both those investigations.
Let me ask you a specific question.
Sure.
You believe he was biased, right? That's clear based on your answer there. Did that bias influence the decisions he made within the FBI directing agents to go in a direction or perhaps more than one or two directions investigating the Trump campaign because of that bias?
Those questions will be asked, and we're very interested in hearing his answers. But I will tell you that the bias, which was clearly against Donald Trump and for Hillary Clinton, is reflected in the actions that were taken by the FBI in both those investigations. They leaned over backwards to give her special treatment that no other criminal suspect would receive. And in the Trump case, they leaned forward to launch an investigation, the roots of which we need to learn a lot more about.
Did Peter Strzok fill the application out for the FISA warrant that was later used to surveil Carter Page, sir?
I have to be very careful about answering questions regarding documents that are classified, so I think I'll pass on that. Let me just say that he was heavily involved in that investigation.
Was there, I apologize, maybe there's another way to phrase this then, respecting the bounds by which you're trying to operate here. Was there anyone within the agency who was more central than Peter Strzok on the Russia investigation as it relates to the Trump campaign?
That's a great question. We're certainly going to ask that of him. But from what we know at this point, he was a central figure, perhaps the central figure, in both investigations.
Okay. I understand he's a talker. He likes to explain himself. I imagine if I were him, I'd like to explain myself as well. Have you ever met him?
We'll be there to listen, and we have lots of questions that we'd like to listen to his answers to.
Right. Have you ever met him, sir?
I have not.
Okay. And based on his reputation, what have you heard about him?
I think that he has a long-term reputation of being a very effective counterintelligence agent, and that reflected in how both these cases were handled caused us to have a lot of questions about the nature of his conduct in each of those investigations, reflected in bias that he expressed in his private email and text.
How much did that IG report that reflected bias, how much did that affect what you're doing on the House side in your committee?
It's a tremendous help to us because while we have been working in the same direction, the Inspector General had access to a lot of documents and a lot of witnesses a lot earlier than we did. So the Inspector General's report and his testimony before the Judiciary Committee and Oversight and Government Reform Committee helps to fill in a lot of pieces in this very complex puzzle. But his report only covers the Clinton matters, and even those are not completely covered. So many questions about other aspects in comparing and contrasting these two investigations. That's what we're about, making sure that we do not have that kind of bias reflected in a future presidential campaign by anybody of any party, and 2020 is not that far off.
If you think about this, if the Federal Bureau of Investigation was investigating as to whether or not Russia was meddling in a national election, why would that information not be shared with the campaign that was targeted?
That's a very good question. And we're going to, as we proceed here, and we have a number of high-level witnesses that will be coming up here in the next several weeks. We have the FBI director and the Deputy Attorney General testifying in public tomorrow before the Judiciary Committee. So these are questions that are going to be brought to light.
This is not under oath, right? This is just a question. And is it fair to say a question and answer session? Is that how you describe it?
Yes. We first of all, we said that we were going to subpoena him because we had tried for weeks to get him in. Then his attorney said, well, he'll come voluntarily, which creates a different set of circumstances. Then we got a lot of uncooperation about setting that time, so I issued a subpoena last Friday, and then again earlier this week it turned into a voluntary interview again. It is something that allows both sides more latitude in gathering information, so we're very comfortable with the format that we have, and we will hold a public hearing with Mr. Strzok in the very near future.
So that will happen?
That will.
Is there a date?
Not yet.
Will you have Lisa Page appear as well?
There are lots of discussions about a lot of witnesses in this case, and she is certainly on that list.
Well, sir, thank you for your time. I know you want to get inside that room, and we'll see how long it goes. I expect this to go several hours, late into the afternoon. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's a good guess.
Okay. We'll see what
Lots
we
of
learn.
questions.
Bob Goodlatte, I hope you come back, okay? Thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
You bet. 11 minutes now before the hour. Waiting that, Sandra.
Fox News alert, we're awaiting one more big Supreme Court decision today after the justices ruled in favor of the president's travel ban yesterday. How a big case could affect the future of public sector labor unions across the country. Plus, President Trump threatening Harley-Davidson with higher taxes over its plan to move some production overseas. More on this ahead.
They announced it early this year. So Harley-Davidson is using that as an excuse, and I don't like that. The people that ride Harleys are not happy with Harley-Davidson, and I wouldn't be either. But mostly companies are coming back to our country.